Chapter 16. You are physically wired to take the path of least resistance. The brain is the most complex structure known to man. It still obeys the same physical laws everything else does, though. For example, it obeys the laws of electromagnetism. Your brain communicates through neurons that use chemical and electrical signals to pass messages to each other neuron. Electricity flows down the path of least resistance. Conductivity of electricity is increased by two things within the brain. The first factor that helps conductivity is the insulation provided by the myelin sheath that surrounds the nerve fiber or axon. By the way, this myelin sheath is primarily composed of fat, which makes for a good insulator. If you have ever heard of someone dying because of a low body fat percentage, a lack of insulation for neuron communication is the fatal factor. The second factor that helps conductivity is having a shorter distance between two communicating neurons. It's harder for the electricity to make the jump. There's the saying in neuroscience, neurons that fire together, wire together. As you grow throughout childhood, you develop patterns in ways that you look at the world. Neurons grow more connections and form neural nets that correlate to some of our complex behaviors, patterns, and cycles. In time, our brains stop forming newer connections with the same ease as it did when we were children. In fact, during the stages of childhood and adolescence, about 50% of all neurons and synapses are pruned. The idea is that unnecessary neurons are being removed so a stable identity and a set of behaviors can be established. The nature in which the brain develops has a psychological effect on us. If the brain stops growing and just finishes pruning unnecessary connections, it suddenly becomes more challenging to learn new things. Language is one of the more obvious examples. I didn't have to apply much effort at all to learn English when I was a child. When I became an adult, it took me much more effort to learn Spanish, even at a beginner's level. It's not just learning that has changed. My habits are now more ingrained. In order to start a new habit or break an old habit, I must exert a greater effort. Loretta Bruning wrote an insightful book, Meet Your Happy Chemicals, that talks about this process of habit forming and breaking and much more. She talks about how it takes 45 days to rewire your brain and form new habits. If you try and break a habit, your brain will release the stress hormone called cortisol in your bloodstream. This is the universal chemical that tells you that you are going to die. It is unhappiness. Bruning believes that if you can maintain the behavior that you want to happen for this 45-day period, then your neurological structures will finally shift. You would have altered the path of least resistance to a new path altogether. Running is a good example of how your body eventually gives in if you put in the effort. If you take a few weeks off from running, running is hard. If you keep running every day, it gets a little easier every day. The hard part is never actually about running. The hard part is running every day. From my experience, that's how the rest of your life works too. No matter what the habit, your brain will always fight you. It will tell you to go back to what you used to do, and even reward you with happy chemicals if you do. For all intents and purposes, you are physically wired to take the path of least resistance. Whether it is through neurochemicals or electricity following the path that is best connected and insulated, your body resists change. The trick is that you can change. It's just hard to do it. The development of the self is crucial to take any other path than the path of least resistance.